Greetings, panellists. Chinese President Xi Jinping wants to see a rich, strong, democratic, civil, harmonious, beautiful, socialist, modern, strong nation by 2050. Now, we'll have to see how that works out in practice, but this broad aspirational statement would not be out of place in an ALP manifesto stating our broad goals as a democratic nation. Maybe we have more in common with the Chinese government than we think. Has China found a way of effectively combining capitalism, Marxism and democracy that we could learn from and which could assist a rapprochement in our relationship with Beijing?
Well, that was certainly a well-performed question. I don't know, I couldn't see whether Terry's tongue was in his cheek or not, but I think there are elements of that definitely to explore as well. But Chris Bowen, are there similarities here in the Labor Party's manifesto and the Chinese Communist Party's? You're wondering how to answer that?
No. And, you know, Xi Jinping is a serious Marxist. I mean, and it's a serious Marxist regime. And yes, it's an authoritarian regime. It's also a serious Marxist regime. But I will say this. Obviously, engagement with China is in Australia's best interest. And obviously, the more we can do to get a relationship based on communications and mutual dialogue is beneficial. And we've been doing that. We've been doing it carefully and methodically. We've had the first minister-to-minister meetings in years and years in the first 5 months of the government. But I'll say this, Australia's foreign policy will always be based under a Labor government, and to be fair, most of this is bipartisan, on Australia's values and interests. And in Australia's interests are a stable region, and Australia's values are obviously not what you would read in a Communist Party Marxist manifesto. Australia's values are about tolerance and openness and respect and, you know, all the things which are important to us as a country. We are different countries with different governments. That doesn't mean you can't talk to each other and find ways of working with each other and recognising those areas of disagreement. We disagree with China on a whole bunch of matters. I don't need to go through the list. But we've taken the view in the new government that communications would be better and talking to them would be better and not expressing our views about China in a way to maximise our own domestic political advantage, which frankly the previous government did, which is what I think led to a big problem. Now, we will always stand up for Australia's values and Australia's interests, and that will mean telling China where we think they're wrong. And again, there's a long list of places where we have disagreements and a difference of views. But it is better, and I support the work of Penny Wong and Richard Miles and others in seeking that better dialogue and engagement with China.
I want to go to you and also Ross on this, but can I bring Anthony and Varsha in? You are the youngest people on the panel, and it has been often said that China will very much define the 21st century. Watching, Varsha, the tensions with China, the prospects of war, increasing military spending, the sabre-rattling we hear coming out of China as well, how do you see this moment?
I think I'd have a similar question to what was asked. It's confusing because I think a lot of our media and the way we talk about politics as well is quite Eurocentric. We seem to just focus on certain countries and then paint other countries as, you know, doing several things wrong and not really being able to have an open dialogue on what's actually happening. Like, I'd love to actually learn about this at school and like have that experience. And I think it goes to a bigger conversation about what real multiculturalism is as well. Like, being able to understand another country means also being able to have that foundation at school, and that's not given presently.
I want to add, I think what's important is when you have these conversations, you have to take consideration the effects, sort of the side effects and ramifications it has on community members here. You know, we saw during COVID exactly what happened there. That anti-Asian racism was through the roof during those periods because of a simple virus. Having these conversations is important. We should be having these conversations questioning what affects the Chinese government and the Chinese well, country as a whole will have on us. But it's also important to understand what happens if we speak of them in a derogatory manner. What kind of discrimination we could raise. And you have to be careful of that and understand those nuances.
You've raised this, and indeed you've told me you've experienced this.
Yeah, it's the rising geopolitical tension has had a very big and negative effect for Chinese population, people of Chinese heritage, I should say. In Australia, there has been rising suspicions. People are suspecting people of Chinese heritage of being spies or apologists of CCP just because of their race or because they may have a view that's different. It is very troubling.
Ross, Chris Bowen talked about, tentative steps here to try to right the relationship, and the two countries are talking. But if you're talking about a rapprochement, and that was part of Terry's question, is that possible right now, given the trajectory China is on, the aggression we've heard, the prospect of potential conflict with Taiwan, and the pushback we're seeing in the region with forming things like the Quad as a bloc to push back against China's ambitions in the region? Is there a fundamental, as Chris outlined, a fundamental clash of values that makes a rapprochement? Not likely.
Well, I think Chris is right. There's differences in values. I think he's also right to say that the fact that we've got different systems of government, I think different systems of governments is a clearer reality than different values, actually, in terms of the people. But the fact that we've got different systems of government is not a reason not to interact as closely as we can on all the areas where those differences are not getting in.
Is it possible, though, given the tensions that we're seeing at the moment in this climate?
Not today, not tomorrow, but over time, yes. And I think it's tremendously important for peace and prosperity right through our region that we do that. I think that we shouldn't be thinking only of a relationship with China. A relationship with Indonesia and Southeast Asia is critical, and that's been neglected in recent years. And if we're getting that right, then I think that will help us to provide ballast in the relationship with China, because the countries of Southeast Asia, so important to Australia, and don't have the same complete breakdown in communication we've had in recent years. So I think it is possible to move forward step by step, and there will be very big differences. President Biden is quite correct to say that there is systemic competition going on, but the fundamental competition is competition to show whose system is best for the living standards and the health of our communities. And we do best in that community by building a good and equitable and prosperous Australia. I think that is the way in which, the main way in which this systemic competition, certainly that it should play out, but will play out. There is danger of war. That would be a terrible mistake. There was talk of that a couple of years ago. But we need to be analytic about it, need to be knowledgeable. We need to realise on the Taiwan question, there has not been a fundamental change in the Chinese attitude to
They've always
Taiwan.
maintained to take it by force if necessary.
The things that were said at this party conference in that matter could have been said at a party conference 40 or 30 or 20 or 10 years ago.